Key number 6, the biblical calendar, 2 divisions, religious and civil. Key number 6 was researched and produced by 144,000teachers.org. For seminars, conferences, and enrollment, please contact us at 144,000teachers@gmail.com. For further studies, visit our website at 144,000teachers.org. The biblical calendar, 2 divisions, are based on the moon, sun, and barley. The biblical calendar, 2 divisions, religious and civil, are based on the Luni-Solar barley harvest Mosaic law reckoning and may be traced from the very beginning of time. The biblical calendar, religious and civil divisions in the spring and in the fall. While the religious division starts in the spring around March-April Gregorian reckoning, the civil division starts in the fall around September-October Gregorian reckoning. The biblical calendar, religious division, new moon and barley. The religious division starts in the spring with the new moon at the season of the barley harvest. The religious division is made up of the spring and fall feasts. The biblical calendar and the religious division. The religious division is found in Leviticus chapter 23 and Numbers chapters 28 and 29. The religious division was shown in key number 2. The biblical calendar and the spring festivals. The spring festivals are Passover, celebrated on the 14th of the first biblical month, also called Abib. Unleavened bread, celebrated from the 15th to the 21st of the first biblical month, is followed by the 7-day Sabbath on the 22nd of the first biblical month. First fruits, celebrated on the 16th of the first biblical month, is followed by Pentecost on the 9th of the third biblical month. The first biblical month corresponds to the month of March and April, Gregorian reckoning, and the third biblical month corresponds to May to June, Gregorian reckoning. The biblical calendar and the fall festivals. The fall festivals are the Feast of Trumpets, celebrated on the 1st of the 7th biblical month, the Day of Atonement, celebrated on the 10th of the 7th biblical month, while the Feast of Tabernacles, the 7th of the feast, is celebrated on the 15th to the 22nd of the 7th biblical month, corresponding to September-October Gregorian reckoning. The biblical calendar and the sabbatical year and jubilee. According to Leviticus chapter 25, verses 4 and 10, the sabbatical year and the jubilee year both start in the fall on the Day of Atonement. These 2 festivals are connected with appointed divine agricultural and civil rules. The biblical calendar and the sabbatical year and jubilee rules. The first rule is regarding the land. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 4, "But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land." The second rule is regarding possession. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10, "And you shall allow the 50th year, and you shall return every man unto his possession." The third rule is regarding the servant. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10, "And he shall return every man unto his family." The biblical calendar and the civil division in the fall. The sabbatical year and the jubilee year are part of the civil division as they start in the fall of the year around September-October at the time of the fall festival of the Day of Atonement. The biblical calendar, the civil division at the Day of Atonement. Leviticus chapter 25, verse 9, "Then Thou shalt cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the day of atonement shall he make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. The biblical calendar and the calendar dates. There are numerous calendar dates in the Bible, more than 100 altogether, but these are not evenly distributed, some periods being marked by a comparatively larger number than others. The biblical calendar and the time divisions. In the account of the flood and Exodus, in the prophecy of Ezekiel, the post-exilic books, and the Gospels, there is sufficient number of time divisions to each period to frame the form of calendar employed. The biblical calendar and the beginning of the civil year. It can be demonstrated that these various calendars are all based upon the lunar month, but that they principally differ in one respect, the time of beginning the civil year. The biblical calendar and the lunar month, sunset to sunset. Under the administration of Moses, current time, both of civil and religious, was reckoned from the first month, and that this month was lunar is shown from the fact that the day ended at evening when Levitical uncleanness ceased. The biblical calendar, no calendaric change. This ancient chronicle from Exodus to Deuteronomy covers a little more than 2 19-year cycles, that is, to the conquest of Canaan. The biblical calendar and the King's Chronicles. Biblical history does not note any further calendaric change until the time of the kings, under whose reigns there are very few dates, but instead long series of king lists which, for the ministry of Judah, began the regnal year in the autumn. The biblical calendar and Ezekiel's chronology. A departure occurs in Ezekiel's chronology, which is characterized by a large number of captivity dates planted upon a regnal year, this representing both the period of the captivity and also that of the captive king. The biblical calendar and Ezekiel's dates, with possibly one exception, Ezekiel's dates all denote civil events, but, contrary to the interpretation of some, must necessarily begin in the 7th month of September-October Gregorian reckoning, or else they do not conform to the chronological outline of the period. The biblical calendar and Nehemiah and Ezra's chronology. The civil dates of Nehemiah and Ezra are outstanding because they begin the reign of Persian King Darius I upon the autumn, a fact recognized by many chronologers. The biblical calendar, Haggai and Zechariah's chronology. On the other hand, the regnal year of Darius I is counted from Abib, corresponding to March-April Gregorian reckoning, by the prophets Haggai and Zechariah. The biblical calendar and the flood chronicle. An earliest of all ancient reckonings, the Pentateuchal flood chronicle takes its place with various forms of calendars just described. The biblical calendar, the flood, and the importance to chronology. In actual point of time, the flood belongs to the most primitive period of biblical history, the patriarchal age, but the large number of dates that occur in the description of the flood at once give it an historical character. This is of untold interest and importance to chronology. The biblical calendar and the flood year. In any event, Moses must have had at his disposal the two recognized calendars of Egypt upon which to plant a series of dates pertaining to the flood year. The biblical calendar, neither Egyptian nor Babylonian. Moses does not employ the economic Egyptian calendar with its wandering 30-day month. Neither does he make use of the empirical observations of Babylonian astronomy. The biblical calendar and the flood, the simplest form of lunar calendar. Under the influence of the divine spirit, he reckons back many centuries in time and ties his record to the very simplest form of a lunar calendar. The biblical calendar and the parallel periods and weeks. He does instead number his months after the manner of both Israel and Egypt in his own day, and fixes their length by a series of parallel periods and weeks. The biblical calendar and the lunar and solar constants, and he thereby establishes both lunar and solar constants relating to the length of the lunar month and year and to the length of the solar or tropical year. The Grace Hamadan Collection, The Flood Chronicle, pages 4 to 7. The biblical calendar and the Flood Chronicle. Further studies on the biblical calendar based on the Flood Chronicle in Genesis chapters 7 and 8 reveal the day, month, year, and exact season the flood took place. Discover the flood chronology in key number 7.